Hi everyone, it's Tamara here with another card making tutorial. This time I'm using the Toucan from the Tropical Party Pack from Wondering Wabbit. It includes 7 birds plus multiple scene builders and sentiments. I'm going to be doing some simple watercoloring to make that kind of watercolor rainbow behind, and then some Copic coloring of the Toucan. So let's get started. So I've already printed my Toucan out on some Copic Expressit cardstock, so we'll set him inside and do some Copic colouring later. And I've also grabbed some watercolour cardstock to do my watercolour background. So I'll be using my Altenew Artist watercolours for that. I have a timber chopping block that I use to hold my watercolor paper down. Just helps it from not warping too much, and just some blue tape that you just get from your painting store or hardware store in the paint section, and tape that down to the board. Just doing a simple wash of color in rainbow. So I've got my rainbow colors on the right and my distress sprayer, because I will be just spraying those to get them nice and moist. I also have a container of water, so I'm just going to put down just a wash of water down on my surface just to get a little base down. And I've also got a little piece of paper towel that I'm just wiping off my excess water on to help me get my colors to blend together and just remove any excess water when I put that wash down. This is really very simple. I'm not a very good watercolorist, but I just like that effect of the water colors with that nice bright rainbow color. And it's nice and easy to join these all together. So now I've gone with the purple first and linking that through to the blue, and you can just see me cleaning off the colors in between my layers and just wiping off that excess water on my paper towel. So I'm just blending that in through together and making sure I don't lose that blue, because I did bring that green down and that purple. So just kind of work between the colors until you've got the exact blend that you're wanting. So now I'm going with my yellow and then onto the orange, and then finishing off with my red right up the top. Just work between those colors until you get a nice smooth blend. And then we'll just go back with that orange just to reinforce that. The yellow going down into that green. And I think with that green and blue, that should be enough colors. And we'll set that aside to dry. Now I referenced this photo of a toucan, so that's the kind of color scheme I'm going to use for my toucan today. So I'm going to have all my colors just up in the left hand side of this as I color, and then I'll be also listing them in the description box below for you. So I'm just going to add my black color in of my part of my toucan. So I'm just working out with the lightest color where all my shadows will be. So obviously I'm going to have my light source up into the top right hand corner, so all my shadows will be back on the left hand at the back, and obviously his little head will be throwing some shadow, as well as his little wings, and that little bit of fluff on his chest there will be throwing a little bit of shadow, as well as the drink. So now we'll blend that out with the C7. So we go in the darkest color was the C9, blend that out with the C7, and then we'll bring that lightest color in again, which was the C5, to finish off our blend with our toucan. So just blending that down and working out that C7 and down into his little belly, which will be our highlight. Now I just wanted to reinforce those colors because we didn't get really a smooth blend as I would like. So I'm just going to reinforce those shadows and then bring back in that C7 to blend that out. And then we'll bring back in the C5 once I've finished blending out with the C7. And I'm much happier with this blend now that we've gone in with the second layer. So sometimes you will need to go over a couple of times if your blend isn't as smooth as what you'd like, and you can see how well that looks after a second blend out. Just working in those little flicking motions to make sure we've got that smooth. Now I'm going to go in and put some shadows in with V01. So that works really well with adding a little bit of shadow with our yellow markers. So I went in with the yellow 15, blending that out with the yellow 13, and we'll finish off with the Y11. And again, I'm just going to reinforce that to make sure we're getting a nice smooth blend. So I've gone back in with the V marker, the Y15 and the Y13, and then our final blend with our Y11 for his little face. Now you can see that there are a couple of little orange sections, and I'm just adding a little bit of color to his eye first. So it's kind of a yellowy green eye. And then we'll add those little little red kind of portions, ready orange. So I'm going with the R59 as my darkest color, R56, and blend out with the R46, and finally my R43 to blend that out. And then his little legs were kind of like a bluey color, a blue-green color. So I'm using my BG05 as my darkest color, blending that out with the BG02 and the BG01 as my lightest color. And I wasn't quite happy. I wanted a little bit more contrast, so I'm going to bring in the BG78, blend that out with the BG05, and then bring that BG02 in, and then finish off with that BG01 again. So you can just see that darker color just added a bit more contrast there. So now we're going to go with the beak. So I'm just going to use the two colors that are in there, the blue and the green, to blend that beak out. So I'm going in again with that BG78, the same that I used for those little feet. The BG05, so pretty much all the same colors that I used in the feet for the blue portion of this. The BG02, and blending out finally with that BG01, just flicking up into that white space because we will be using the green and coming down into that blue. So we've got YG06, YG03, and then YG01, blending into that light blue, so you get that nice smooth blend between those colors. And then we're going to use the red portion, the same as the red color that we used for the tail. So the darkest color is the R59, and obviously the light will be hitting the very end of his nose because it's coming from the top right hand side. And just working little flicking motions, we're going to blend out with that R43. And just to make sure we've got that smooth blend, I'm just going to run through those colors again and just do a little bit of tip to tip with the R46 and R43 to get a nice smooth blend. Then I'm just going to do some yellow shorts for our little bird. So I went in with our purple color again, so I'm doing exactly the same colors that I used for the face. So you can always incorporate the same colors from the body into, things that the, bird or whatever you're coloring is wearing, so that it all just blends nicely together and works well together. So I'm just going to reinforce with those colors, so working that shadow in with our V01. So obviously at the back of his shorts will be in shadow, and also where that drink is throwing a bit of shadow. Go out with the Y13, and then we'll finish off again with our Y11 until we've got that nice smooth blend between those colors. Now for the leaves, I'm just going to use like a two color combo, so the YG06 and the YG01, so a dark color for the contrast and then a light color to flick that out. And then the flowers, I'm just going to start using those same reds that we used for the tail and the beak. So just gone with the lightest color first, just to work out where my shadows will be. And I'm just going to have the two colors working together, the R46 and the R43. So now we're going to blend out with that lightest color, So we've got a nice little contrast between those two colours. And then we just need to fill in those little inserts, so we're just going to do with one single colour. Now there is a little bit of black around his beak, and also I forgot to do his little paw, so we're going to do the same colours that we used for the most of his feathers. So the C9 as the darkest colour. And I'm just reinforcing. I did feel that you know, where the C5 was, it was still just that little bit light. So I'm going to go through these colours again and just reduce that C5 portion of the body down a little bit. So now I'll blend that out for his beak and the hand, and now I'll be much happier with this having that little bit less of a highlight. I think it just looked nicer that way. Much happier with that colouring and where his highlights are on his chest and wings. Now we'll fill in his mouth and his little tongue, just using the same colours we used for the other reds. And we'll finish off now with his drink, and then our image will be all coloured up. So I've gone with the darkest colour, the E59, blend that out with the E57, and finish that off with the E55, and then we can finish off with his straw and the hat. So just reinforcing that shadow with the E59, blending that out with the E57, and then we've got a nice smooth blend now with our finishing off with our E55. So I'm just going to do simple colours with a couple of just two colour combos for the drink, straw and little umbrella. So the rest I'll just have the two, so the Y15 and the Y13, and we'll do a green with the YG06 and the YG01. Sorry, YG03. And that is the drink all done. Now I've cut out my little toucans now that he's all coloured up, and I'm going to work out where to put my sentiment. So I've just placed him on the front, and I'm going to just use a stitched rectangle die to cut out my watercolor panel. So I'm just lining that up so we get a bit of that purple and a bit of the red at the top, and using some purple tape that down and run that through my die cutting machine. And we'll grab at our Misti and get ready to put our sentiment on. So again, I'm just going to place our toucan where I'm going to have him so that we can work out where our sentiment fits. So I've just got this wild set from Lawn Fawn, and I thought that would work perfectly with this toucan. So I'm just going to have the sentiment saying, "Have a wild birthday." So I'm just lining that up, working out, having that a little bit offset. And so we want partially over our watercolor and partially over our white portion of our colored cardstock. So just work it out until you're happy with where everything is sitting on your panel, and we'll attach that to the front of our Misti using some VersaFine Onyx black ink. I'm just going to give that a stamp and make sure we've got a good impression. Give that a double stamp. Now we'll set that aside to dry. I've cut and scored a blue card base and added some glue to the back of our panel now that that sentiment is dry, and just lining that up, give that a good press down, and I'll set that under a book to dry properly while I get some of this foam tape on our toucan. So I've just got this roll of foam tape which I'll use for most of the portions of him, but for his little feet I'm just going to cut down some smaller little squares that I had. And using my reversible tweezers, just line that up on the front, make sure I'm happy, and then give that a good press down. And this is the finished card for this tutorial. Just doing that watercolor rainbow was super simple, but it just adds such a vibrant color to the front of my card, which matches in perfectly with this bright toucan. Thanks so much for watching this tutorial. If you've liked it, please hit the like button. And if you'd like to see any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.